Ladies and gentlemen, welcome to the daily update. My name is KK. I'll be analyzing the market today with you guys. Market is up about 0.86% on the S&P, led by the Nasdaq. The Nasdaq is up about 1%. Small caps were slowing down a little bit today because small caps been thriving quite well last several weeks. Small caps are up only about 0.3% or something like that, but pretty much across the board, market is up around 0.8, maybe a little more, a little less, and then market pretty much gapped up and it grinded all day. So let's try to dissect what happened today and trying to figure out what we can expect going into tomorrow and possibly remainder of this week. We do have shortened week this week also. Friday, due to the New Year's Day, the market is closed. I did check, but New Year's Eve, we do have a full day. Not half day like Christmas Eve, but on this New Year's Eve, we do have a full day. So we got 3 full trading sessions remaining for the year of 2020. So hopefully we can get some idea of where we are headed in the next several days. And we'll go from there, right? So let's. So it looks like we gapped up here, right? And it looks like that was what? That was about 0.7% gap up. That's a decent size gap up, especially when the market is in this elevated situation. Looking at things in more of a bigger picture, and to have some kind of a 0.7%, I would have to say that's a pretty decent gap up. And we held that gap pretty much all day today, right? So it looks like that's where we opened up in the morning and then we sold off a little bit. It looks like that gap area. So that gap was actually good because, there was this down gap. We've been talking about and tracking this down gap. We wanted to see this down gap getting filled as quickly as possible. And that's what we talked about on the weekend analysis also, right? And so with this gap up, we pretty much fill that gap all the way today, right? We gapped up here, came down. Obviously maybe it would have been a little better. Maybe if we didn't see that lower wick, then it could have been maybe some kind of an island gap, right? If we didn't see this lower wick, if we held up all day instead of coming back down, we could have even categorized this as a island bottom reversal because we got the gap down, we got the gap up, would give us a little bit more potent signal for the buyers. However, we did see that lower wick. So we ended up coming down and filling the gap. So there's no longer a island bottom gap there. But nonetheless, it's a good sign that buyers are filling these down gaps, right? Because there's a big down gap here too that got filled. Things were a little bit hectic after the gap got filled because every time when the gap gets filled, it's going to act as instant resistance. And so both of these down gaps are filled now. But this time's a little bit more different because this time we actually opened up gap in the process of filling this gap. So that's even better than just going up and filling it. With the gap up, what happens is the gap area is going to provide support. That's why I put a line there, 371, 368. All this vicinity is going to act as support should the price decline or see some kind of shenanigan, right? So this is the first hour, fluctuated, kind of came back a little bit, second hour sideways, third hour sideways, fourth hour sideways, fifth hour little push. Pretty much on the last hour came back down. So pretty much all day long, it just made sideways. And this is something that we've been witnessing last several months, maybe 4 or 5 months, where we see initially a big gap up or something like that at open, and then price just consolidated the entire day. That's kind of been kind of a trendy move that we've been seeing in the last 4 or 5 months. So I wasn't surprised to see this market just kind of hanging around after that gap up there. So obviously this is the support area that buyers want to protect. It will be better. You know what? I'm going to put this here too also, the short-term support, because we saw that level getting respected today. That's where that down gap was filled today after gapping over it. So 371, 370, I think as long as the buyers can able to protect this level right here, above 370, 50-ish, above 370.50-ish, I think that we want to continue to give benefit of the doubt to the buyers in the short term. My short-term moving average is continuing to rise here, right? And things are a little bit more hectic when the price were trading below my short-term moving average. But once it flipped and we are seeing that level acting as support throughout, and we see a gap up, definitely the trend is up. Looking at things in the short term, we also talked about last week, we talked about these higher lows and higher highs. With this gap up today, that will be considered as another higher high, right? So every time when we see a cultivation like this, that doesn't mean that that's for sure gonna be the bottom. That's not what it means. It means we are seeing the price cultivating these higher lows and higher highs. Let's give benefit of the doubt that it's gonna continue in that. And we opened up today, you see a gap up, and yet again we cultivated another high there, right? And so that's kind of what we were focusing on last week. With these higher lows and higher highs there, in which we talked about there was a constructive move for the buyers. Let's zoom out a little bit and check out that more like a midterm sentiment of this market. Another thing we talked about was this higher lows on the midterm also, right? Newly discover this support area, right? And these are the higher lows there. These are higher highs. So again, what we talked about on last few weeks is that I do not know where the bottom is. Nobody does, and I don't know if we're going to actually break this support this time around. Nobody does. But what I would do is that I want to continue to give benefit of the doubt to the buyers in the midterm. There will be some shenanigans. There will be some fluctuations because we've seen these type of corrections and pullbacks, right, in the last month and a half or so. So I want to continue to give benefit of the doubt to the buyers with that cultivation of higher lows and higher highs. And we also talked about these shenanigans that you will see. This is not something crazy or abnormal or anything like that. These are just normal market fluctuations. Without market fluctuations, there's no market. Nothing goes straight up or straight down. We will have up and down shenanigans. And we also talked about you don't want to get into a dramatic conclusion just because we see a sharp decline. Keep in mind there's a pretty big gap down here last week, and that's exactly what we talked about. Let's not get into a dramatic conclusion. Let's not be emotional until we see some kind of evidence. You know what I'm saying? We talked about that midterm moving average is still rising. We still got that higher lows and higher highs going on here, right? And that rising uptrend support still holding. So I wanted to give benefit of the doubt to the buyers. That means I don't know exactly how the market is going to play out, last week or this week. I'm favoring the buyers that we have higher percentage that the market could continue cultivating higher lows and higher highs. And that's what I mean when I say let's give benefit of the doubt to the buyers. Trend is still up despite the fact that we saw some of those declines along the way, right? And that's how this market moves, right? It might have a decline here or up here. I don't know where. That's what we always do our analysis based on what we see, not what we don't see or what we think it should be happening, right? We gotta look at what's been happening, and we gotta pay attention to what has been happening, and we say that's probably how this market is gonna continue in the near term until it gives us a different evidence, right? Certain evidence they might be changing. Maybe things are changing to establishing a downtrend, but we didn't have anything like that ever since early November. This market never really got into a downtrend. It was always in an uptrend, despite the fact that market had its up and downs, but always faithfully cultivating that higher lows and higher highs. So as of today, I do want to continue to give benefit of the doubt to the buyers in the midterm also. Now that we have saw this as a low, we got those higher lows here also, right? So I think what buyers want to do is protect this gap. I guess if you're wishing or wanting this market to see a lower prices, then you would want to see this gap getting filled as quickly as possible. Otherwise, a lot of times when the gap stays open, it might come back and retest, right? You can see right here, I'll give you a couple examples here. Those are gaps that are still open, right? This gap's still open, this gap's still open. Today we opened this gap. So what happens is when the gap remains open, there's a good chance that buyers can push it. Even when they bring it back down, that entire gap area is gonna act as support, right? And then they push it back up, right? Here's a gap here. You initially made a move to the upside, came back down to retest that gap area, and then later, what happened? We did see another gap up actually and made a move here. So when you see, especially in an uptrend, you see that gap remaining open, that's a bullish signal going into the near term, right? Let's check out that oscillator. Maybe we'll get a little bit better idea where the market is headed. So the oscillator is giving us near that overbought level. Keep that in mind. I've said this before. We could get into overbought level. Doesn't always mean market cannot move higher, right? So right here and right here. So a good example of that is this. You see here where it looked like market was overbought, and and then we saw a pretty big gap up here. You see that right there, right? And also it looks like right here, it looked like it was overbought, but market initially moved sideways this time and then did see a pullback, and then, the oscillator reset it. Here, what happened was price moved sideways after it hit that overbought here, right? But then price actually gotten back up after moving sideways. Here was overbought, price actually continued higher next day. We pull back a little bit and then we continue higher. In that process, oscillator did reset. Here this was I think like a week ago, this was a couple weeks ago. We hit overbought, but next day we gapped up again. And we actually did pull back, but then we actually got back up and this thing did reset. So we're now back here, right? We're back here, or up here at overbought level. So there's many things could happen at this point. Buyers are getting a little tired because they pushed it quite a bit since it was trading at 362 or so. We're now trading at 372 today. Either we see another last push from the buyers to get this completely overbought, right? Maybe another gap up or something like that, and then we could grind sideways, or we see a shorter term pullback, maybe even retest my short term moving average, right? And then letting the oscillator reset. Worst case scenario, maybe even come down, fill this gap that was open today. It would be better for the buyers if that gap remains open and protect that gap. So the best case scenario for the bulls, make another move and then grind all day, kind of let this oscillator reset a little bit. Otherwise, bears start to come. Bears want to fill all that gap here. But a lot of times when you see a big gap up, and usually when it holds throughout the day, that's what happened here. We saw a gap up. It held throughout the day. We saw next day gap up. There was a gap up here. You see that gap up here? It held. We initially made a move, gap, and there's a gap up here. It held. Initially made a move. So those are kind of the examples that we've seen last month or so. When you see a gap and it holds. So I think there's a good chance that buyers might try to push a little bit more. So it will be important to see how the market behaves tomorrow. I'll come back for you. And also my promo investor plan promo, it will be the promo will be ending this Thursday, the New Year's Eve. So we got 3 more days there. Link is on the description below. You guys enjoy your evening. Good luck trading tomorrow.